In this life, people will promise to love you forever until forever starts to look like hard work. My name is Daniel, and this is the story of how the woman I loved walked away when I was at my lowest, only to try to come back when success finally found me. I never thought love could turn into a lesson this deep, but I learned the hard way that sometimes losing everything is the only way to see who truly belongs in your life. It all started 3 years ago. I had a good job, a comfortable apartment, and a woman I believed was my future. Her name was Melissa. She had this way of smiling that made me forget every worry. I thought we were building something real. We talked about marriage, kids, traveling, the whole picture. I was working a logistics firm, earning decent money, not rich, but enough to keep us happy. I handled most of the bills. She was studying and working part-time. I didn't mind covering extra. I believed in her. I believed in us, but then life threw a curveball. The company went bankrupt. Suddenly, hundreds of us were unemployed overnight. It felt unreal. I remember sitting in that meeting room as HR read out the news. People were crying, others were shouting. I was just numb. I had never been jobless before. I came home that evening, trying to stay calm. I told Melissa what happened, expecting her to say, "It's okay, we'll get through it." But her face changed. She looked worried, distant, like something cracked inside her. She said, "So, what now?" And I said, "I'll find something else. It's just temporary." But she didn't hug me. She didn't even hold my hand. That night, she slept facing the other side. And I felt something inside me break a little. The days that followed were hard. I applied everywhere, sent out resumes. Went to interviews that led nowhere. I started doing small gigs, delivery jobs, anything to keep us afloat. But I could see the disappointment in her eyes grow every day. She'd make comments like, "I miss when we used to go out more," or "I just want stability." I try to stay positive. I told her, "Things will change, trust me." But her trust was fading. One evening, I came home sweaty and tired from a warehouse shift, and she was sitting on the couch, dressed up, makeup on. I asked, "Going somewhere?" And she said, "Daniel, we need to talk." That phrase always means trouble. I sat down, and she said, "I can't do this anymore. You've changed. Everything feels heavy. I need to think about my future." I said, "I'm your future, Melissa." But she shook her head, tears in her eyes. She said, "You used to be so driven, so full of life. Now you're just surviving." I wanted to scream that I was trying my best, that I hadn't given up, but she had already made her decision. She packed her things within an hour, and just like that, she was gone. I sat there that night staring at the empty space where her shoes used to be, and I felt hollow. I didn't cry that night, but something inside me died. Quietly, the next few months were dark. I was broke, broken, and lonely. I questioned everything, my worth, my choices, even God. I'd wake up and stare at the ceiling, wondering why hard work never seems to be enough. Sometimes I'd pick up my phone hoping she texted, but there was nothing. I deleted her number but still remembered it. I try to move on, but pain has a way of sitting in your chest, uninvited. Then one day, while scrolling through social media, I saw her smiling in a new picture with a man beside her. Fancy restaurant, expensive clothes. Caption said, "New beginnings." That one hurt. I felt like someone punched me in the stomach. I realized she didn't just leave me. She upgraded, or at least that's what she thought. I remember sitting there, phone in hand, and something inside me shifted. Not out of anger, but out of hunger. I told myself, "All right, Daniel, you've lost everything. Now it's time to rebuild." So I started again, small steps. I found a part-time job in IT support, taught myself coding at night through YouTube tutorials. It wasn't easy, but the hunger kept me alive. I failed so many times I lost count, but each time I thought of her words, "You've changed," and I used it as fuel. I promised myself that one day I'd be proud to look in the mirror again. One day I'd have my smile back. I stopped checking her social media, stopped talking about her, and focused on my grind. Months passed, then years. Slowly, opportunities started to come. I got a freelance gig building a website for a small business. They loved my work, told others, and within a year, I was making more money freelancing than I ever did at my old job. I saved every penny, invested in myself, took courses, upgraded my equipment. Before I knew it, I wasn't surviving anymore. I was thriving. I moved into a new apartment, simple but mine. I bought my first car, and for the first time in years, I felt proud. But even then, I didn't show off. I just worked in silence. That's when fate decided to test me again. One night, I got a message request on Instagram. The name made my heart stop for a second. Melissa. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Her message said, "Hey, it's been a while. I saw your company page. I'm so proud of you." I smiled to myself, not out of love, but disbelief after all this time, after all the pain. She suddenly remembered I existed. I typed back, "Thanks, simple." "Nothing more," she replied again. "You've really changed, Daniel." And I thought to myself, funny, that's the same thing she said when she left, except this time it was true. I was no longer that broken man begging for love. I was someone who built himself from ashes, and she could see it. That night I sat back, remembering everything, the nights of hunger, the rejection, the loneliness, and I realized maybe she was part of the plan. Maybe her leaving wasn't the curse I thought it was. Maybe it was the spark I needed to become who I was meant to be. Still, I didn't reply again, and that silence said more than words ever could. A few weeks later, I ran into her by chance at a cafe, and what happened next changed everything. She was standing by the counter, holding a cup of coffee. When our eyes met for a second, time froze. She looked almost the same, but there was something different. Maybe it was the guilt in her eyes or the surprise on her face. She smiled nervously and said, "Daniel, wow, it's been forever." I nodded slowly, keeping my composure. Inside, I felt this strange mix of calm and power. Not revenge, not bitterness, just closure waiting to happen. I said, "Yeah, it has." She asked if she could sit. I hesitated, then said, "Sure." She sat across from me, eyes scanning me like she was trying to catch up on all the years she missed. She said, "You look good, really good." I smiled lightly and said, "Thanks, been taking care of myself." She laughed awkwardly. "I can tell you've changed so much." I said, "Yeah, I had to." For a moment there was silence, just the faint sound of cups clinking around us. Then she said softly, "I'm sorry, Daniel." I looked at her and said, "For what exactly?" She swallowed hard. "For leaving, for giving up on you when you needed me the most." I was scared. I didn't know how to handle it. I nodded. "I know," she said. "I thought you'd never recover. I thought you'd stay stuck forever. But look at you now. You proved me wrong." I said, "I didn't do it to prove you wrong. I did it because I had to survive." She looked down, eyes wet, and whispered, "I miss you." That hit me for a moment. Not because I wanted her back, but because those were the words I once begged to hear, and now they meant nothing. I said, "Melissa, I'm glad you're doing okay, but the man you left doesn't exist anymore." She looked at me, confused. "What do you mean?" I said, "The man who needed your validation, who thought love was about convenience. He's gone. I had to bury him to become this version you see now." She wiped her tears. "I made a mistake, Daniel. I let fear make my choices." I looked at her and said, "No, you made the right choice. You left when you didn't believe in me. And that pain made me who I am. I should thank you." She shook her head. "Don't say that. I don't deserve it." And I said, "Maybe not, but that's the truth." She looked around and said, "I'm not happy. You know, the guy I left with. He wasn't who I thought he was. Everything fell apart." I didn't say anything. Part of me felt sorry, but another part of me felt peace. She continued, "When I saw your success, your company, I realized what I lost." I smiled gently and said, "You didn't lose me. You gave me back to myself." She looked away, embarrassed, and said, "Maybe we can start over." Even as friends, I thought about it. I really did, but I said, "Melissa, sometimes the past belongs in the past. Not out of hate, but because we've outgrown it." She tried to smile, but I could see the pain. She said, "I'll always care about you." And I said, "And I'll always remember what you taught me." We finished our coffee, said goodbye, and that was it. She walked out of the cafe, and as I watched her leave, I realized something powerful. Healing doesn't always come from closure. Sometimes it comes from knowing you've moved on without needing revenge. I went back to work that day with a strange lightness. My company had been growing fast. We had clients across the country, and I had a small team that believed in the vision. I built a tech platform that helped small businesses automate their logistics. Ironic, the same industry that once fired me. Now I was creating solutions for it. People started to notice. Interviews, podcasts, articles. Suddenly my name had weight. Daniel Collins, founder and CEO. But what people didn't see were the nights I cried quietly, the years I doubted myself, the fear of failing again, but I carried it all with pride because those scars reminded me of where I came from. One night, I got home late, exhausted but proud. I sat on my balcony, city lights shining below, and I thought about everything from the day she left to the cafe moment to the success now, and I realized something deeper. The goal was never to make millions. The goal was to find myself again, to rebuild the man who lost everything, to create peace that money can't buy. A week later, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten. It was from Melissa. I opened it slowly. It said, "Daniel, I know I can't undo the past, but I hope one day you'll remember me kindly. I'm happy you found yourself again." I folded it, smiled, and kept it in a box with other memories, not out of longing, but as a reminder of how far I'd come. I didn't reply. And I didn't need to, because sometimes silence is the loudest answer. From that moment on, I stopped looking backward. I started mentoring young men and women who lost everything, teaching them how to rebuild from rock bottom. I told them, you don't need everyone to believe in you, just yourself. My story went viral online. People connected with it. They saw the pain, the honesty, the growth. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving, I was inspiring. One evening after a speech, a man came up to me and said, "Bro, your story saved my marriage. I was about to give up, but hearing you made me fight again." I smiled and shook his hand because that's what it's all about, turning pain into purpose. If you've ever been abandoned, left behind, or broken, remember this: not everyone who leaves is meant to return, and not every loss is a punishment. Sometimes it's a preparation. Life doesn't take people away to hurt you. It takes them away to make room for something better. I learned that through tears, through hunger, through loneliness, and through faith. Success without peace is nothing, but peace after pain, that's everything. And that was only the beginning of my story, because success doesn't stop when you reach the top. It tests who you become when you get there, and what happened next would test everything I had built. A few months passed after that letter. Life was moving faster than ever. My company had grown beyond what I ever imagined. Investors were calling. News outlets wanted interviews. I was traveling across cities, shaking hands with people I used to only read about. But inside, I tried to stay grounded. I remembered those nights when I couldn't even afford dinner. I promised myself never to forget that man. Because success can blind you if you forget who you were when nobody believed in you. One night I got a call from an old friend. He said, "Daniel, I don't know if I should tell you this, but Melissa's not doing well." I paused. Part of me didn't even know how to feel. He said, "She's been struggling. The guy she left with left her too. She's back home, working small jobs, just trying to survive." I said quietly, "I hope she finds peace." He said, "She still talks about you sometimes." I thanked him and hung up. That night, I sat alone thinking about it, not out of satisfaction, but reflection. Sometimes life brings you full circle, not for revenge, but to remind you of how far you've come. I thought about reaching out, but something told me not to because some chapters are meant to stay closed. Instead, I decided to do something else. I started a foundation to help people who had lost jobs, people just like me once, men and women trying to rebuild their lives after being knocked down. We offered free training, career guidance, mentorship, everything I wished I had when I fell, and I named it the Second Chance Project. It felt right. It felt honest. And within months, we were helping hundreds of people start over. One day after an event, I walked out of the building, and there she was standing across the street. Melissa, she looked different, simpler, humbler. She smiled softly and said, "Hi." I said, "Hey." She said, "I saw your speech. I didn't know you'd be here." I nodded. Life's funny like that. She looked nervous, her hands fidgeting. I just wanted to say thank you. Your story helped me too, even though I was part of it. I smiled. "I'm glad. That means a lot," she said. You became everything I always believed you could be. I just didn't have the patience to wait." I said, "Maybe it had to happen that way." She nodded. "I still think about us sometimes." I said gently, "So do I, but not with regret, just gratitude." She smiled sadly. "You really forgave me, didn't you?" I said, "A long time ago. Not for you, but for me." She looked down, tears in her eyes. "You're a good man, Daniel." I said, "I'm just a man who learned the hard way." We stood there for a moment, two people who once loved deeply but grew in different directions. She said, "I wish you happiness." I said, "I already have it." She nodded. And that was the last time I ever saw her. As she walked away, I didn't feel anger or sadness, just peace, pure peace. I got into my car, looked at my reflection in the mirror, and whispered, "You did it, not because I made millions, but because I made it through." Months later, I bought a small house by the sea, quiet, calm, perfect for reflection. I'd wake up early, drink coffee on the porch, and watch the sunrise. Every morning reminded me that life moves on, that everything I lost made room for something greater. One day, a journalist came to interview me. She asked, "Daniel, what's the secret behind your success?" I said, "Pain, discipline, and forgiveness." She laughed softly. "That's not what most people say." I said, "That's because most people only see the reward, not the cost." She said, "Do you ever wish she stayed?" I smiled and said, "No, because if she stayed, I'd never have become who I am." She nodded quietly. And for a moment, I could see that she understood. Later that evening, I got an email from a young man. He wrote, "Sir, I was abandoned by my fiance after I lost my job. I wanted to end it all. Then I saw your video. You saved me. Thank you." I stared at that message for a long time, and tears filled my eyes. Not from pain, but pride, because my story wasn't about loss anymore. It was about purpose. It was about showing that even when life strips you bare, you can rebuild stronger. I replied to him, "Your story isn't over, it's just beginning." And I meant every word, because I knew the feeling of standing at rock bottom, wondering if the pain would ever end. And I also knew the beauty of rising from it. That's what life is, cycles of loss and rediscovery. Sometimes the person who breaks you becomes the reason you grow. I often think about how love and failure are two sides of the same coin. Both teach you who you are when everything else is gone. Years have passed now. I'm still building, still learning, still helping. And whenever people ask me about Melissa, I just smile and say, she was my greatest teacher, because she taught me that love without loyalty is fragile, that comfort without struggle is temporary, and that when someone walks away, you don't. Chase, you rebuild. In this life, people come and go, money rises and falls, but character, that's what stays. And the man I am today was born from the ashes of the man I once was. So if you're listening to this and you've been left behind, if you've been broken or forgotten, let me tell you something. Your pain has purpose. Your story isn't over. You might not see it yet, but one day you'll look back and thank the heartbreak, because it woke you up, it pushed you to grow, and it showed you what you're truly made of. And when that day comes, when success finally finds you and peace replaces pain, you'll understand exactly what I mean. My name is Daniel, and this was my story, a story of loss, love, and redemption, a story that proved sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is walk away, so you can finally learn how to stand on your own.